Today I'm looking at an infamous copycat known as the Super Mini SNO2 Home Entertainment System. It's modeled after the SNES Classic and even made headlines after it left parents shocked with certain games that aren't even really safe to mention here on YouTube. So while I will be skipping the ROM hacks that could be considered 18 plus rating based on the title alone, I will be unboxing, playing, and then tearing down this system to see just how ridiculous the Super Nintendo from China really is. Just a look at the front of the box, and it's pretty obvious it's doing its best to mimic the look of the Super Nintendo Classic, even down to the artwork. Unfortunately, my box is beaten up pretty good in shipping with the front dented in. Not really a big deal, but I guess my collector's value is out the window at this point. We do seem to have two controllers, 821 8-bit games, this will be important later, and 1080p output. Either side has the Super Nintendo controller branding, and the bottom shows the HD output, power rating, 9-pin gamepad input, and then the built-in games again. On the other side, we have the classic advertising jingle, contains Super Mario, Contra, Ricky Cunio series, TMNT series, etc. games list. You don't have to game card, download. Yeah, it's going to be fun. Opening the box, we have two Super Famicom themed controllers, which actually don't feel terrible, at least compared to other cheap third-party controllers. The buttons have a nice press to them, and the plastics, at least, is solid. The D-pad, however, doesn't have a pivot at all. The entire thing just presses down, which means fighting games or platformers are going to be extremely inaccurate. We also have a USB power cord, an HDMI cable, and a set of instructions that is filled with some great localization work. There are A and B buttons on the machine which do not support running kicking, so it has a higher requirement on APM and operation end. The playability is also higher. Never allow children play it alone for it comes to the power using. Please turn off the machine and operate it after cooling it when there is something wrong with the running machine, like a system halted. A list of the games included on the console are on a piece of paper. Scrolling through the games on the system can be pretty tedious, so I guess this was a way to at least see all of the games easily. You can pause the video here to see the list for yourself. Onto the system, it's pretty straightforward with a similar shape and size to the Super Nintendo Classic. The obvious difference, other than the branding being replaced, is the front with two 9-pin controller ports and a cheap-looking red LED between them. The power and reset switches are rough. They stick constantly and don't have any sort of spring back. It feels cheap, but it's not surprising to see cutbacks in quality like this in a clone system. Fortunately, they're functional enough so we can power the system on and see what we have. Okay, here's the first screen you see when it starts up, with 6 different categories that divide up the 821 games. I don't have enough time to go through every game and category, but we'll look at a few while we're here just to see how they run. So we can choose between action, shoot, sport, racing, puzzle, and fight game. These will send you to a different menu with the number of games displayed at the top. So action game gives me 416 games that are a mix of NES games and ROM hacks. That's right, this Super Nintendo Classic is loaded up with NES games, hence the 8-bit advertising on the front of the box. This sort of makes the SNES style controller unnecessary, considering we have 2 extra face buttons and a couple of shoulder buttons. It looks like the way this plays out is A and B are normal, except in most games they're swapped around for some reason. X and Y are just turbo buttons of A and B, as in you hold one down and it will just rapidly press the button in game. The shoulder buttons are just A and B located at the top of the controller. The turbo button placement actually isn't terrible, and when you're in a game like a top-down shooter, it does help out quite a bit. I spent some time just cycling through different games on the system and found them all to be stretched to widescreen, which isn't a look I'm thrilled with for emulating NES titles. It just makes the image look weird compared to a 4:3 setup. Most of the games I played were at least functional. The emulation here isn't great, with bouts of slowdown and audio glitches. There also seems to be a slight bit of input lag introduced here, but I didn't set out to test the exact latency for this one. It's just a feeling you'll get for platformers or for Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. I mentioned there were games on this device that caught parents off guard, and I wasn't joking when I said YouTube wouldn't be happy with some of the content in these ROM hacks. We'll just say they weren't age appropriate for a younger audience, and I'm sure it led to some very awkward Christmases with the grandparents thinking they found the perfect gift. Some of these lists of games do vary between systems. Even though they all say like 821, I have noticed some people just got different games on their systems anyway, so it might be hit or miss depending on if you had some of these controversial titles on your system in the first place. I did find a Contra 24-in-1, but it turns out that was just a level skip in menu form. Probably pretty confusing for first-time Contra fans to jump several levels into the game, but you can do that. There's also Mario in Space, which is definitely Mario in Space. It's an obvious ROM hack where they just added Mario and different Mushroom Kingdom enemy sprites into Galaga. Oh yeah, check it out. Mortal Kombat 4. The character select screen has a bunch of different color portraits of the characters, and when you get into the game, yeah, it's as bad as it looks. I'm not really sure what's going on here. The moves, they don't connect on your opponent, and it ends up just being a button masher until someone falls over. Mega Man UDX. It's a crossover of Mega Man 3 and Sailor Moon for some reason. I mean, clearly this is Sailor Jupiter. Mega Man in general does not play well here at all. The stretch screen, input lag, and rough D-pad make this a disgusting adventure in ROM hacking. Over in the puzzle category, I found a bunch of Pokemon games. We have the classics right here. Look, blue, green, yellow, and golden. As far as I can tell, these are all terrible side-scrollers where you play as what's apparently Eevee or Blastoise, and you run to the right. I saw Pikachu, at least I think I saw Pikachu in there too. This is a shame since there's a pretty good version of Pokemon Yellow that was converted to the NES, but that's not what we're dealing with here at all. Well, at least Zelda is fun, except that it can't save your game. I guess it's back to the 90s where we left the system on overnight and hope our mom doesn't unplug the system when she's vacuuming. I think that's enough of playing the classic. Let's take a look inside. Under the 4 stoppers on the bottom are Phillips head screws, and removing them open the entire system up. There's not much here, with 2 boards connected with a cable in between. The board in the front mostly just houses your controller ports and that LED with the on-off and reset switch, with the backboard having our main chips along with HDMI and power. There are 3 chips to look at here, with the main one being this 3805 chip. Most of the time, you'll find a glob top or ID numbers being sanded off. In this case, they at least left 3805, but it didn't really give me much to go on when it comes to identifiers. Next to it is a 512S chip that I'm assuming is flash memory for the ROMs on board, with 821 of them. This most likely sitting around 512 megabytes. The other side has a chip that is easily identifiable and appears to be 128 megabytes of RAM. The entire thing is very basic, and like most NES clone systems, is built with the lowest price point in mind. I do have images of all the different chips here in this video, so if you want to spend some time, maybe you can identify them a bit further. The SN02 is built like completely on quantity alone. It doesn't matter much if the quality is poor. If you can advertise more than 800 games for $60, it's easy to pass it off as a value buy. Some games were at least playable, but the experience is significantly worse than really any other way to play these games outside of another clone console. As for the headlines it made, it's pretty obvious that the few people who put this thing together, they were just grabbing packs of ROMs and ROM hacks and threw them onto the chip with a basic menu to navigate around. Something tells me there wasn't any curation around what was here, provided they got the number of games high enough to pass on the box. For us, it's not surprising to find some weird ROM hacks on a clone console, but I guess for a casual buyer, it could catch them a bit off guard when scrolling the game list. The only issue I have is the media seemed to cover this in a way that made it seem like this clone console had a major spot in the market and was widespread. If this was a system actually produced by Nintendo, sure, it would be big news, but this is a system people are finding at outdoor markets and places like AliExpress. I guess Amazon was probably the easiest place to buy these things for a little while, but I have noticed these listings, they keep getting pulled down if there are hundreds of games being advertised on the box. Amazon most likely doesn't want to deal with any kind of backlash from some of these publishers or companies in gaming due to there being tons and tons of ROMs on these things when they ship. The best part is NBC saying they reached out to Disney for comment on a ROM hack that removed the main character's clothes. Guess what? They didn't hear back from Disney on that one. How shocking. Most of the coverage just seemed to paint the video game industry with a single brush using low-quality ROM hacks that they found on this SN02 as their basis. Anyway, I don't recommend buying this system, especially at the same price as something like the Miu Mini, for example. Let me know what you think about the SN02, though, down below in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.